Hello and welcome to Enchantment of Eternity's Top 15 of Star Trek Villains. This is a patron requested video requested by patron Tyler Cease. Thank you so much for your request. So, Tyler's request was originally for the top 10 Star Trek villains, but I had too many on my list that I wanted to talk about, so I made it a top 15 instead. So a few ground rules with this list. First of all, I will not be including any villains from the Star Trek movies because I already have a video out for the top 5 best and worst villains in the Star Trek movies, and I just think the movies are totally different thing, especially where villains are concerned. And another rule that I have is that I'm not going to have any like races or any species. Like I'm not going to have the Borg or species 8472 or the Romulans or the Breen. This is only for specific characters. Even though, yes, I know that the Borg could count as one character since it's a collective, but no, I'm not doing that. So no like races, species. They have to be specific characters. I do have one entry that's like 2 characters, but still they are specific people. So also I want to mention a few things you will not see on the list, just so you're not like wondering. First of all, Khan will not be on this list, even though a lot of people think that Khan is one of the best villains in Star Trek. First of all, I think Khan's overrated. I don't think he's nearly as good as people say he is. And secondly, he's mostly good in The Wrath of Khan, and I just said I'm not including the movies. So that only leaves Space Seed, which he was a very average, very overrated episode. Like, all he did was, he said that he had superior strength and superior intelligence, yet Captain Kirk kicked his ass and outsmarted him. So that seemed more like a tell not show situation. Plus, all he really did is just throw Kirk in a dryer and put on the spin cycle. So. Other character you will not see on this list is Q. I have decided that he is not a villain, that he's more of a, menacing ally. A sort of pain in the ass type ally rather than the villain. I do, admit that he was originally introduced as a villain in season 1, but season 1 sucked. The 2 episodes he appeared in weren't good. The only good episodes he was in was the ones where he was being sort of, a kind of annoying ally. So, even though I did include Q as a villain in one of my other videos, I decided that it didn't quite fit here. Now, the other thing I should talk about is the criteria for this list. So there's different criteria one could use to judge the best villain, because best is kind of subjective. Is it the villain who's most dangerous, or the villain who thwarts our heroes the most? Is it the villain who's most evil, who has less morality? So I decided to not go with any of them. Instead, I went with the villains I like seeing on screen, the ones I want to see more of. So like kind of the opposite of get off my screen characters, kind of like get on my screen characters, like characters that I want to see more of and I enjoy seeing and I think enhance the episode. So that is the criteria I'm going for. So I came up with a bunch more villains on my short list, and I did want to mention them. So I'm just going to very quickly give a shout out to all my honorable mentions before I get into the top 15 proper. So first honorable mention is Michael Eddington. Next honorable mention is Armis. Next honorable mention is Alursa and Bator. Next honorable mention is Kai Wynn. Next honorable mention is Commander Dullum. Next honorable mention is Maul and Locke. Next honorable mention is Silic. And then next honorable mention is Admiral Pressman. So let's go ahead and jump into my top 15, starting with my number 15, Tamalak. So one thing I also will say is a lot of the entries that are high on my list has a lot to do with the actor portraying them. Like, they have a really strong, really good actor, then the villain will come up higher on my list. And that's the case with Tamalak, who's played by I can't really pronounce his name, but Andrea Katalas or something like that. He played Jakar in Babylon 5, and it was in a few other things, such as playing the one-armed man in the movie The Fugitive. He was easily the best actor on Babylon 5, and the best thing about that show, the acting was a bit mixed on that show. He was one of the standouts of actually being really good. And he does a really good job at Tamalak, who had the potential to be a really good recurring villain in Next Gen. Probably, if you don't include Q or Lore, and don't even get me started on Lore, is probably one of the rare recurring villains. He's the only one, Romulan one, unless you count Sela, but she only appeared in two-parters, so I don't. And he's way better than Sela, too. Just the way that he's menacing, and he's like very deceptive and tries to outmaneuver Picard with negotiations, and when that doesn't work, he outright threatens him. I love the scene in The Defector when Picard says, "Do you really expect me to surrender?" And he's like, "No, I expect you won't." Kind of like he's really excited about getting in a fight with the ship. So Tamalak is a really great villain. So next we'll get into my number 14, which is the Warhead from the episode Warhead in Voyager. Again, this is another example of the actor being a strength, because in this case the actor is Robert Picardo, because the warhead, or artificial intelligent bomb or missile if you want to call it that, but the warhead takes control of the Doctor, and Robert Picardo does such an amazing performance here. It's really intense. I think it's one of the most suspenseful, intense episodes of Trek, and I think the acting is what really says it. I think Garrett Wang does a really good job too, and you see the butting heads and the negotiating between Robert Picardo playing the warhead and Garrett Wang as Ensign Kim. And yeah, it's just super intense. Like the time when he was like, "Everyone on board will be killed!" Like, it's just so intense. So he was a really good villain. So next we'll get to my number 13, which is the Sphere Builder. Now this, I am not breaking my rule about race or species, because in this case I am referring to a very specific character. It's just, to my knowledge, that character was never named on the show. It's the Guardian is what the Xindi call her, but she's the main female character from the Sphere Builders, who are from the future, and they're using this weird time thing to communicate with the past to try to get the Xindi to destroy Earth. So we find out towards the end of season 3 that she's actually the force that's manipulating the Xindi to try to destroy Earth. So she's the real threat to Earth, and she is a very, very menacing villain. Now, I did, if you noticed, had a few Enterprise villains lower on the list in my honorable mentions, such as Silik and Commander Dolam. As much as I like Commander Dolam, I love Scott McDonald, great actor. He is a little bit of a mustache-twirly villain. And Silik, again, John Fleck, amazing actor, and I think he does a really good job as Silik, who's an intriguing villain, but the Suliban were never interesting in most of the episodes he's in. Kind of suck. So that's why the Sphere Builder ended up higher for me, because she was more menacing, more intense, more of a character that really scared me, that it was a huge obstacle for heroes to overcome. So that was my number 13. So next, let's get to my number 12, which is Inspector Kashyyyk, who from the Voyager episode Counterpoint. A really good strong episode, mainly because of this character. And the actor, I saw him play Milos on Seinfeld recently, but the actor does a really, really good job playing this character who's kind of slimy and despicable, but then we find out that he's actually, trying to help the refugees and is trying to defect from his alien race, and he, has a little romance with Janeway, but then we find out it's all an act, that he was just pretending to have a romance with her, that it was just a way for him to try to get information on where this wormhole was, but Janeway, in fact, knew this all along and actually played him and ended up manipulating him and getting the better of him. So good. Such a good villain. So anyway, next we'll get into my number 11, which is Gul Madrid, played by David Warner in the episode Chain of Command, specifically part 2 mostly. And goddamn, the battle of wits between Gul Madrid and Picard in this episode was so intense, and David Warner did such a good job. The back and forth between him and Picard was super intense, and there's just two great actors going at it, and it's really interesting because Gul Madrid, in the physical sense, always had the upper hand. He was torturing Picard. He had this device that could cause pain at any moment. However, Picard would get inside his head and get the better of him, sort of verbally. And so that was made for a very interesting back and forth. So that was a great villain. So next we'll get into my number 10, getting to the top 10 now, starting with my number 10, which is Roan Tarka from Discovery. Yes, I did have him a bit slightly higher than Mullen Locke. I did really, because I hated Mullen Locke at first, but then I actually start to like them more, especially in the reveal of who Locke really was. But then I didn't really like how their story ends. So I thought they were great villains, but I think Roan Tarka from season 4 was better. He's another character who ranks as high as he does on the strength of the actor. I don't recall the actor's name off the top of my head, but he played Aaron Wright on The Expanse and was absolutely amazing, better in that show, but it shows just how great of an actor he is, and he does a really good job as Tarka as well. And I love that Tarka at first was an ally, but he becomes basically the main antagonist, even winning over Book to his side very briefly, but then eventually Book changes his mind, but he gets the better of him and still goes off and tries to kill this species, which is very much against what Burnham wants to do. So the reason what makes him such a great villain is the fact that he's so sympathetic that you can sympathize with him. You can see he kind of has a point, and you can see where he's coming from, why it's so important for him to do this, even though what he's doing is causing harm and making things worse. So it's that's why he ranks so high. And the actor's amazing. So next we'll get into my number 9, which is Lord Garth. Garth of Izar. And I know I'm alone in loving this villain. I would say he's the best villain on TOS, but there's actually one more character that ranks higher than him. I think he's one of the best villains on TOS. It's from the episode Whom Gods Destroy. I just think he's I love seeing this character. It's just the over-the-top hamminess actually really works for me in this case, and I think the actor actually does a good balance of making it come off as not too cheesy, but also really another episode that's super intense and really suspenseful, as Kirk and Spock are trapped in his house of horrors as he is taking over a mental institution with his shape-shifting abilities, and he's insane, talking about becoming master of the universe, and really intense. His shape-shifting abilities makes him a super hard to beat villain, and really intense, and I love his over-the-top performance. Remove this animal! Great villain. My number 9 is Garth of Izar. So next, we'll get into my number 8, which is Agamus from Star Trek Lower Decks, voiced by the great Jeffrey Combs, who I dare say is not the last time you will see a character he played on this list. So Agamus is not like a character who I think is a menacing villain or someone who's impossible to beat. In fact, he's kind of easy to defeat. But he's a character that I want on my screen. He's an get on my screen character. A character that I love, that I want to see more of, mainly because he is hilarious. And it's definitely a play on all the evil computers that's been in Star Trek before, and kind of riffing off of that, and how he's obviously evil and over the top. He tries to trick Boimler into letting him go, but Boimler gets the better of him and says, "You've been boimed." And he's just like, when he thought he's going to win, he's like all evil and turns into this evil thing. He's like, ha ha ha. And in the next episode, like, he's pretending to be good, so he turns blue. Like, you see him go, and he turns into a blue screen instead of a red screen. He is hilarious. Jeffrey Combs does an amazing job voicing him. So yeah, this definitely love this villain. So next we will get into my number 7, which is Sloan, the Section 31 agent from DS9. God, the actor's name again is escaping me at the moment. William Sadler or something, was that it? I saw him on a lot of other things. He was in Predator 2, I think, and was he? No, I'm thinking of Gary Busey. I don't think he was in Predator 2, but he was in a lot of stuff like Shawshank Redemption. He was definitely in that, and that's mainly what I know him from. So he's a really great actor. So again, this is another example of the strength of the actor, but he's also a super menacing villain. And he, particularly when he's always seems to be 2 steps ahead of Bashir, who's at this stage revealed as being genetically enhanced, and yet he's still able to manipulate him. He still has this like rogue sort of clandestine organization of Section 31 that's behind him, and so he's definitely a villain I wanted to see more of. And very clear that I know some people might disagree with him being called a villain, but I think it's very clear that he is a villain. Even though his intention is to do whatever is necessary to protect the Federation, the ends don't justify the means, as Bashir says, and I love that Bashir does eventually get the better of him, and he's willing to die to protect his evil secrets. But yeah, so great villain. So next, we'll get into my number 6, which is the female changeling. Again, is another character who was never given an official name. I think she even said, "What use would I have for a name?" when Odo asked what name she had. Yeah, so this is a really creepy character. It represents, the founders of the Dominion being like who are the force behind the Dominion. And we see, especially in season 7, just how evil and callous she is, how she just, willy-nilly orders the, murder of like thousands of people, and just has like no like redeeming qualities. And you get sort of the mythology that she was the changelings. She used to be hunted by the Solids, and they sort of grew rigid and created this vast empire to protect themselves from this persecution, but ends up becoming an evil society that persecutes others, even those that wouldn't harm them. And the way she tries to manipulate Odo in several episodes makes her a super interesting character. Definitely a sort of highlight of DS9. So next we'll get into my number 5, which is Seska from Voyager. The best recurring villain on Voyager. I have to clarify that for another entry, but she's the best villain who's recurring on Voyager. And don't even get me started on the Borg Queen. I'll mention her when I get to the worst of villains. But in the best villains, Seska was an amazing villain. The reveal. She started out as just a regular ensign who would be like, sort of negative voice and people's ears, but turned out that she was a Cardassian spy all along, which made her a super interesting villain. She defected to the Kazon and tried to give the Kazon the advantage. It made her a very menacing villain, and I love her the way that she played mind games with the characters, particularly Chakotay made her particularly insidious and a character I definitely wanted to see more of. So that is my number 5. So next, we'll get into my number 4, and this is another example where I do believe that this character was never given a name, so I'll simply refer to him as the Romulan commander from the episode Balance of Terror, played by Mark Leonard. This was an amazing villain because you could really sympathize with him. You could really see his point of view and the way that he admires Kirk, even though Kirk is his direct adversary in combat, was really interesting, and it was a really nice flip on the whole villain aspect, because he remains a villain because his objective was to start a war with Starfleet, and his objective was to destroy the Enterprise. So he's very clearly the villain, but we see that he is actually sort of an honorable man, and he respects Kirk, and so that made him such a more interesting, such a more dynamic villain. So next we will get into my number 3, which is Anorix from the episode Year of Hell and Voyager. This is why I had to quantify Seska as being a recurring villain, because there is one on Voyager who's higher than her, but he's not a recurring. He only appeared in that one 2-parter, which is my favorite episode of the entire show. And it's played by God, I can't believe I'm blanking on his name, having brain farts all over the place. But anyway, and most people know him from that 70s show. I actually recognize him more as the villain in RoboCop. He was also in the Things Past on DS9 and did a good job there. He's a really good actor, so this is a case that this villain is this high on the strength of the actor for sure. But he's also really, again, a really tragic figure, one that you sort of feel for, that he's lost his wife and he's trying to regain the Empire, and his obsession is getting the better of him, and he's obsessed with time, and so you kind of feel for him, and they actually give him a happy ending along with everyone else. This is really interesting because usually the goal is to kill the villain or defeat the villain, but here they did defeat him, but in the same time they actually gave him the ending that he wanted. They gave him the happy ending. So really good stuff, really, really good villain. So, next we will get into my number 2 best villain in Star Trek, and that is Weyoun from DS9, recurring Vorta, of course. As I mentioned, Jeffrey Combs would appear later. Jeffrey Combs, amazing actor. I don't really consider Tran to be a villain. That's why he's not on this list. And Brunt will be on my worst list because I hate Brunt. But he's really good as Weyoun. I think is absolutely intense, amazing villain. Again, I love sort of the mind games that he plays, and he tries to manipulate people through being a diplomat, but in the end he's just as cold, calculating, and cold-blooded murderer just as much as the female changeling is. In fact, he worships her as a god, and so does her bidding at a whim, and you see that he's able to exert his power when he needs to. And you have amazing scenes like in Call to Arms episode, where he and Sisko are, he tells Sisko to remove the mines or we'll take the station from you and remove them ourselves, and then they have this whole dialogue back and forth about, maybe we come to this peaceful resolution, and Sisko's like, oh yeah, we might be able to do this, and he's like, oh, isn't this so great, we're going to compromise. And then you cut to Sisko in his meeting, he's like, no, they're going to attack, everything we said afterwards was just bullshit. and that makes him such a great villain. So now get to my number 1 favorite Star Trek villain, in all of Star Trek, and that is Gul Dukat. Yeah, so DS Stein kind of dominates this list, or at least the top two. It has really, really great villains, and Gul Dukat is definitely the best villain. Mark Alimo does such a really good job of making this character absolutely despicable. He's egotistical. He's definitely a character I want to see more of. The one thing that is kind of, I will hold against him is the fact that there's a few episodes where they try to make him sort of a good guy. I didn't really find that as interesting. But the ones that really portray him as an absolute villain, such as in the Dominion takeover of the station arc, he's so fascinating and so interesting. He's so despicable too. Like he's responsible for the occupation. He manipulates women, and he's just so disgusting. And it's basically a Hitler type figure, and so you really want to see him defeated. But the way Mark Alimo plays him just makes him such a fascinating character that you definitely love to hate and you want to see more of. So he is my number one favorite villain in Star Trek. So that's it for my top 15 best villains in Star Trek. Thanks so much for watching. If you enjoyed this video, you can check out my channel, as I'm currently covering every episode of Star Trek. At the moment, I am up to season 4 of Deep Space Nine and season 2 of Voyager, and also I do many other videos on Star Trek and other shows as well, so be sure to subscribe so you can keep up with all of that, and thanks a lot for watching.